fiat currency, which is inflating every year.
Every day.
Every day. And, I mean, the recent thing that the government has done since this credit crunch, you know that they ploughed billions, they printed. They say for the first time we're going to have to print money and put it into the system. What were they doing before that then? But ask them that and you'll just get looked at.
This is billions of pounds.
They printed it, poured it in to prop up the system in order that it doesn't collapse, because as we all know, quite rationally, it was going down the plug hole. The only way to save it, in their wisdom, was to plough more money in.
But there's still a credit crunch. You still can't borrow money.
Exactly. Well, the banks have chosen not to lend the money. Now, you have your Chancellor out there saying he's telling the banks to lend the money and to give it to small businesses, and what are they doing? Nothing. And why? Because the Chancellor has no power at all over these people. But he wants to create that illusion. And
well, Mayor Rothschild in 1920-something, I think, said that give me the power to print money and I care not who makes the laws.
Exactly.
I paraphrase, but that sort of thing, basically.
Exactly. They have control and power. And if the Prime Minister, who was previously the Chancellor, were sat here now and I asked him the question about how can you possibly condone the issuance of our currency as a debt, well, he'd probably go into one of his little wobblies and pretend that he didn't know and all that. And if he didn't, he should never have been Chancellor in the first place. He certainly shouldn't be Prime Minister either.
The other thing about this, which I find fascinating, on top of the fact that the currency is make-believe anyway, is fractional reserve banking. Mm-hmm. You want to describe that?
Yeah, lend me a tenner. And
I'll lend you a mythological tenner then. There you go.
You lend me a tenner, and strangely, I can go and lend that out 10 times over. Because actually what it's based on originally is that you might have deposited some gold with me. And on the back of the gold deposits that I was collecting in, I could actually lend out money to others. Because as long as you don't all want your gold back at the same time, I can actually lend it out. And I could actually do that infinitely.
So you could lend, you have to, the fractional reserve part of it is you have to keep a fraction of it. Is it 10% or something?
It varies. They change it over the years.
But this is like the law that governs the bank.
They've recently changed it so that they have to have more in reserve now. And why? Because the public have woken up to the fact that it's all a scam and a lie in the first place. So
let me just work my way through this then. So say that Bank A, that the Bank of England, say, lends £10 to Bank A.
Yeah.
And then Bank A keeps £1 and lends £9 to Bank B, then they've therefore made £19 out of that £10.
That's right.
Then
Bank B
keeps 90p and lends the rest to Bank C,
who keep 80p and so on.
And so that £10 has now become, you know, £100.
Yeah. The multiplier effect, it can be anything between 10 and 18 times over. And there is a limit set by law, but that limit is arbitrary. It can be changed any time that they want. The long and the short of it is that for every pound that a bank takes in deposits, it can lend it out 10, 15 times over. Now, when you consider that that money was non-existent in the first place, they are earning interest on money that doesn't exist 10 and 15 times over.
It makes you wonder how they can enforce a debt.
Well, I wouldn't mind a piece of this action, and I'm sure you and our audience over there wouldn't mind a piece of this action. Why can they do that and not us?
We can't. It's illegal, though, isn't it? To lend money you don't own?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah. It's illegal to lend out a loan, and that's actually what everyone is doing if they're issuing loans nowadays.
OK, I'm getting loads of texts in, so I'm going to read a couple out, which I think are quite good. This is Mick in Preston. He says, many firms are buying gold from you nowadays because they realise this is going to be the only thing of value in the future. And Bob in Huntingdon says, why are companies buying up scrap gold and silver? Is it due to 2012? Will the powers to be scrap the paper money?
I have trouble linking 2012 with the powers that be scrapping paper money at the minute, although no doubt we'll get there at some point.
OK.
People are selling gold, yes, because on the back of the uncertainty,
gold is real stuff,
to invest in gold. Silver will be the same. These things have retained their value.
Probably all metals.
Yeah, there's various ways of doing it. I mean, if fluffy bunnies happen to be a store of value, then we could all use fluffy bunnies. It really doesn't matter. But gold is accessible, and more to the point, the supply of gold is controllable as well. And guess who controls the supply of gold?
De Beers, isn't it?
It's the same people and organisations.
I know they control
and so
diamonds, but I think they control gold.
I have mentioned before there is another reason why gold is constantly in such demand and as a resource, but that is moving on into the 2012 thing and the why, or deeper down the rabbit hole, you might say.
Okay, so we've looked at fiat currency. We've looked at fractional reserve banking. The real question here is, Key Bono, who benefits? Who owns the banks?
Great question. I keep getting this question, and you know, one day, I've already tried, but one day I'm going to go into the Bank of England and refuse to leave until they actually tell me.
I think you'll probably be arrested.
I probably will be, but you know, it gets to the point where you almost go beyond caring about this sort of thing, because who owns the Bank of England? Well, it's...
Well, hold on, you're a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't you know?
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? I'll tell you who owns it, in a way. You can't put names to this, and I'm not going to use names, but I wouldn't mind betting that most people out there are well aware of who's behind this. There are certain families that are behind this, and they are the elite banking families. But with regard to the Bank of England, for example, there is a misunderstanding that it's actually a private institution. Now, the Federal Reserve is a private institution in America.
Is privately
wholly
owned.
Privately owned.
There was an act passed, wasn't there, in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act. And before that, there'd been two, the first Bank of America and the second Bank of America, and they'd been abolished, and the politicians fought back, but then eventually they were forced to...
They were forced to by the bankers.
I've got to read this. This is a fantastic quote. We've got 8 minutes, I'm all right. This is a quote from Woodrow Wilson after he signed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. And he said, it's quite a long quote, so you have to bear with me here. "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world, no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men."
And how long ago was that?
1913.
100 years, yeah. So it's just, nothing has changed since then. And if people wake up to this reality, because the implications are fairly simple, but when you're not involved in this, it tends to go over your head. But people are beginning to wake up to it.
Well, people were born into this, so it's like you don't question things that have always been there.
Especially if you've got your car and your house and all this, until someone comes along and takes it off of you. But going back to the Bank of England, it is not the same as the Federal Reserve because it is not wholly privately owned. It was nationalised, 1946 I think it was, as a wholly owned company owned by the government, the British government. But that's just a cover story. The whole thing is actually a scam, because if you can show me a nationalised industry that pays its profits to unknown private investors, well, it's not a nationalised industry, is it? And
so what you're saying is that although the Bank of England, unlike the Federal Reserve Bank, is officially nationalised, there are shareholders? Or...
Well, if you grab the Bank of England accounts, and I wrote a paper on this.
I didn't think they had to produce any.
Well, they produced their account. Actually, I've got something here, and I haven't scanned through it, so I don't know if I can find the relevant bit straight away. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Any profits made by the bank in its day-to-day business are paid over to HM Treasury. That's what it says in the Bank of England's accounts. I would question the ambiguity of phrases like day-to-day business and paid over, because if you look in the accounts, you don't find anything paid over. And it says, according to the Banking Act, 46 and 1998, it says half of the profits are payable to the Treasury. Now, I had a letter back from Her Majesty's Treasury when I raised this question with them a few months ago now, and it says it's wholly owned and all the profits are paid to the Treasury. Well, you look in the accounts, it says half the profits are paid to the Treasury. So
this is the current accounts say this, do they? Half the profits?
yeah, the Bank of England